So, Brother Livre.
Good morning, dear brothers and sisters. And good morning to those that are, virtually tuned with us this morning. So with that being said, then it's about 2019, but the end of 2019, some of you might be aware I got injured on my knee, and so as a result, I had to get surgery on my knee. At this point, most of you guys that know the Amena boys, you know that the Amena boys into soccer. And so I had a surgery that required me to be, out for about, 3 to 5 months. So I took some time off, resting and doing some rehab at the hospital. And so in the spring of 2020, the whole entire spring, I didn't really do much as far as playing soccer competitively went. And so I just rested mainly and play pickup games here and there. Maybe played a little bit here and there, but nothing competitive. Yeah. And so towards the end of the year, in the fall season, when the school season was getting ready to get rolling, I went out and started training with the school team. Yeah, and so I was training with the team. In the initial stages, it wasn't too bad. It was pre-season, so what could have gone bad? The training were easy to begin with for the most part, and eventually as we're progressing with the practicing sessions, the sessions started getting harder and harder, and so about a month and half into the pre-season. Yeah, I re-injured my knee again. So I re-injured my knee. Wasn't able to play, and so I decided I was gonna take some time off from the injury. So I ended up taking must have been about 3 weeks off. Not training with the team, and so likely for me, in the fall of 2020, we did not have a season, just because of Corona. So that worked out well for me because we didn't have the season. And so what ended up happening then was, I was, doing some simple rehab, with one of the school trainers at our school. And then one of my teammates, his name is Rafa, he approached me one time. He's like, Livre, man, that must be, frustrating, like, not being able to play and, being injured and being out. I'm like, yeah, Rafa, yes, it is. It's frustrating, man. And so Rafa he asked me, so what are you doing to recover then? Yes, I told him, I go, Rafa, yeah, I mean, I'm seeing Josiah, who's the trainer from our school. I'm seeing Josiah, doing the best I can, trying to stay hydrated, trying to eat well. Yeah. They said, man, that's, he goes, man, I feel you, it's like with you seeing Josiah, is okay, just because Josiah, he has 100 other athletes that he deals with. I don't think, with your condition, Josiah is, the only place for you to focus on. It's like he's got 100 other athletes, for that reason, he's not gonna give your knee the attention that it really deserves to, to heal quickly, and so that you can be able to play. And I go, yeah, Rafa, you got a fair point. So what do you suggest then? Rafa tells me, he goes, I mean, I had similar injuries in the past. His was growing injuries. It's like I had, major injuries. Obviously, I didn't have surgery like you did, but it was bothering me. I ended up reaching up to some friends that ended up connecting me to to a facility where I went to train, and from this day on, it's actually been working better for me. Yeah. And then he goes, I recommend you check it out sometimes. I'm like, okay, Rafa. And so I ended up checking up, the facility that Rafa recommended. The place of the facility itself is called Paradigm. So I ended up going to Paradigm, and I got there, and the first day at Paradigm, I had a guy by the name of Stu checked me out. He was a physical therapist. He worked with professional athletes. And so on the first day, Stuart, checked me out. He did some stuff on me, like he did some compression. And by the time we were done with the first session with him, it's like I was feeling much better. Like, man, I feel like I could go out there and play. And then what Stuart did, they put me on a training program, where I'll be able to go to Paradigm, and train a couple days a week. And within a month of doing this, I got better. Like I was able to play and be able to practice with the team. And so that worked out well in my case. And so what ended up happening was we ended up having the soccer season in the springtime, just because it got canceled in the fall. And so come springtime, ended up having the season, and so during the season of the spring semester, I ended up playing up about half of the games. So I played up half of the games, and season ended. And once the season ended, I stopped going to Paradigm. Like I stopped completely. I was like, okay, now I'm good. I'm fully healed. I don't need Paradigm anymore. I don't need to go train. If I can step on the field and play, that's all I need. That's all I need. And so I stopped going to Paradigm, and then in the summer I tried out for one of the local teams, and on the third session of the tryout with the new local team, I re-injured my knee again, and so I re-injured my knee, and to the point where like I couldn't play. I had to take some time off again. I had to take about 3 weeks to a month off again. And during all that time, all I was doing was just resting, mainly resting, and trying to hydrate, and mainly. And so from that time, then I recall talking to Rafa. I'm like, okay, I'll reach out to Rafa, because he might know, he might give me some good suggestions in terms of how to move forward. And so I reached out to Rafa, and Rafa told me, hey, if that's the case, go ahead and set up an appointment with Dr. Stu. Yeah, and I did what Rafa told me. Ended up setting up an appointment with Dr. Stu, and he ended up checking me again. Did some magic on me, and to the point where like I was feeling good. And after he had done that, he put me on a training program again. So they had me on a training program where I was training a couple times a week with them, and then so I did this for leading up to the season of fall 2021. And so before the fall of 2021, I had a discussion with Rafa again. We just sat down and just chatting. And Rafa goes, he goes, Livre, so how's the training coming along for you? I'm like, I pointed to Rafa. I'm like, man, it's working for the better. I think I might be ready for the fall season in 21. Yeah. And he said, so what do you think that happened to you? Like, what do you think you re-injured your knee again? I told Rafa, man, I mean, quite honestly, I'm not too sure, but it might be the fact that I'm trying to just get on the field and just play. And Rafa told me, he goes, for a lot of athletes, especially those that have been injured in the past, most of them, right after getting injured, they try to focus on the playing aspect too much, to the point where they ignore the training side of things. And they said for a lot of athletes, especially those that have been injured, it's important that that they put this concept into practice. And so Rafa told me this. Rafa told me this, as athletes, especially the ones that are getting back to training to playing after getting an injury, it's important that we don't play to train, but we train to play. He told me that we don't train, we don't play to train, but we train to play. So when Rafa said that to me the first time, I had to think about it for a little bit. I'm like, it makes sense, but I'm not quite sure how it fits into me right now. So I had to process it, think about it a little bit. I go, okay, yeah. And so we kind of left it from there. It's like I'll give you some time to think about it. I'm like, okay, I'll process. I'll think it over. And then we ended up the discussion, by Rafa pointing out that, and it's also critical for the training to be ongoing. At least if you wanna, keep playing. So we'll get back to that in a little bit. And so if we get into our readings this morning, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24, it reads, therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them. So first thing we gotta ask is, what are the sayings in that particular context referring to? And so if we look, turn a couple chapters back. If you turn a couple chapters back, it would have been, the Salmon on the mountain. And that starts in chapter 5. And so, with that being said, and the way I like to kind of, visualize it is that, Jesus was probably, the day before, Jesus was probably, doing miracles, preaching, as well as healing people. And so leading into the next day, probably spend the majority of it in prayer, just praying and, getting ready for his sermon. And so, the following day, it's probably, I can envision like a mountain, with rocks where you can, almost climb. And Jesus probably, climbed a few rocks on the mountain, and to the point where like it was elevated enough where you could, see everybody. And so around him, I visualized, the 12 apostles, 12 disciples, as well as, the majority of the crowds all around. And, here's Jesus, getting ready to, to start preaching and, teaching the sermon. And so with that being said then, so in terms of, the teachings on the sermon, there are so many lessons that can be drawn from the sermon itself. But from it, some of the, I got a few pointers that I thought were practical, and that we can all, apply and be able to reflect on into our lives. There's obviously more, but these were some that stood out for me, and I thought that that were practical and that we could actually be able to apply in our lives. And the first one I got out from the sermon comes from Matthew chapter 5, 19 to 20. Yeah. And the idea is breaking the list of these commandments. It would have been better, if the person hadn't been born, other than, teaching, breaking the commandments, basically. And we get that in Matthew 5, 19 to 20. And the idea behind that is, being able to practice what we preach. And so, at the end of the day, we all have imperfections. And oftentimes we can try to hide them, but the best thing we can really do is, just be honest, to ourselves, mainly, and maybe a few colleagues, that we have a trust in. And in Matthew 5, 23 to 24, we get the lesson of being a peacemaker. if there's a conflict with a brother, try writing it. Obviously, this is easier said than done, and we can all attest, to the fact that Jesus didn't say building on the rock was going to be easy. But in terms of trying to fix the conflict that's going on between us and our brothers, that's in a spiritual as well as practical sense, at least to me. The idea should always be to do our part. At the end of the day, it's that we cannot control what others do or say, but we can at least do our part to try to write things out. And then in verse 5 of 27 to 28, we get this this lesson, that thoughts can be sins as well, and the reading in the reading in that context, has to do with idolatry and how it starts in the mind. And this is not strictly left to just adultery alone. That there's so many other negative thoughts, that we think in our minds, and the important thing with that is that our action stems from our thoughts, and all of our actions stems from our thoughts. We really got to be careful of what we let run into our thoughts. And then from chapter 5 of 43 to 45, we get this practical lesson of loving our enemies. What's the point of only loving those we know and those that we already love? And that's another lesson to embrace, because how do you love people that you talk behind your back? Someone outright who's just really hard really hard to get along with. And then if we go to if we move down to Matthew 6, 14 to Matthew 6, 1 to 4, we get this practical lesson of being humble. Humility is important. Don't do things to put on a show. And it's human nature to want to be all showy and and brag about oneself. But Jesus is telling us that is not what it's all about. And then when we get to chapter 6, verse 14 to 15, we get the lesson of forgiveness. Forgive. And just like some of the ones that I've already pointed out, it's not an easy thing. And unforgiveness, just like a disease, it tends to be more damaging, as time goes, if not taken care of earlier. And this can be manifested in our family life, friendships, as well as relationships as well. Yeah, so having to let go and stop holding onto the grudge of not wanting or being able to forgive others. But we are commanded to forgive others. Then chapter 6, verse 19 to 21. The lesson, the practical lesson there being to keep earthly treasures in their place. Because we are reminded that where our treasures is, that's essentially where our hearts are. And then chapter 6, verse 31 to 34, having to seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness. At the end of the day, it's easy to get caught up in the worries and the anxieties of the world. But our aim should be to seek first Christ and His kingdom. Because He knows what we after. He knows what we need. And then Matthew 7, verse 7 to 11. The lesson there being to true faith will ask, seek as well as keep knocking. And so in our faith, in our approach to God. The idea should be to always be consistent, as that shows our trust, as well as our dependency to God. And then finally, the 10th one, we get to the golden rule, and that's summed up in in Matthew 7, verse 12, and the obvious idea there being, to treat others as we will want them to treat us. And so, obviously, there are more lessons, in the Mountain of Salmon than that, but those were some that stood out to me. And so, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. Verse 26. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, verse 26. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. So couple things on that. So, oftentimes when we think of rain, floods as well as wind, there are positives, as well as, negative symbols associated with, these elements. For one, rain, rain can be used to symbolize, cleansing. Rain can be used to symbolize, calmness, in a positive sense. Rain can also be used to symbolize, growth as well as fertility, and as well as rebirth as well. And another thing that rain does as well, it can symbolize God's sovereignty. And in the negative sense, rain can symbolize turbulence, as well as uncertainties. So that's rain. And floods oftentimes can be used to symbolize judgment, like in Noah's case. But floods can also symbolize temptations as well. And when we get to wind, in a positive sense, wind can represent God's power. It can also symbolize the Holy Spirit, as well as change, depending on how you look at that. And in a negative sense, wind can often symbolize destruction, as well as uncertainties as well. And then we got the rock, which in its obvious sense, symbolizes stability, uncheckability, unwavering. That's what rock symbolizes. A few examples on the rock and how God is referred to as the rock. If we read Deuteronomy chapter 32. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 3 to 4. For I proclaim the name of the Lord. Ascribe greatness to our God. He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are justice. A God of truth and without injustice, righteous and upright is he. Then another good example, of how God is likened to a rock is found in Psalms 42, verse 9. Psalm 42, verse 9 reads, I will say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? Another good example can be found in Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 12. Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 12. And then there's also another one in Psalms 78, verse 35. Psalm 78, 35. Then they remembered that God was their rock and the Most High God their Redeemer. Yeah. And so, with that being said, then in our walk with Christ, we will face temptations, as well as uncertainties. But at the end of the day, Christ reminds us that it's only gonna be by hearing, and acting on His word, that we can truly be stable, and unshakable in our faith. And last week we were reminded of this idea of not giving out, the idea of keeping on to the faith and not giving out, and that can only happen if we constantly read and hear God's word, and remain formidable in our faith. And so with the teachings on the mountain of the Sinai, one thing that I found that stood out was, can you imagine the Pharisees and the Sadducees reading this? They will have been questioning, like, oh, I mean, what's so special about this new rock? As we have the Old Testament, and yeah, like what's so special about this new rock? We have the Old Testament. We do a pretty good job of reading the Old Testament and abiding by the laws. And if you come with me a few chapters before that, so that's going to be in Matthew 5 again. Matthew 5, verse 17. And Jesus says, do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. And essentially what Jesus is getting at is that, as God's Son, He essentially became the fulfillment of the law. So Christ essentially became the embodiment, of what was talked about in the Old Testament. Yeah. And so, like I said, there are probably more lessons that can be drawn from the Salmon on the Mountain. But those were some of the ones that truly stood out and that I thought were practical and head on. And so to conclude, then, oftentimes we know what to do, but we don't do it, and we know the consequences of what's going to happen if we don't do what we're supposed to do. As it relates back to my story with Rafa, so I now train to play, not play to train, because that was my main focus. How soon can I be on the field and just start playing? But the idea should be to, first of all, train, just do your workouts, have a physical trainer maybe monitor you in your training aspect, and then after that, that's getting you ready to play. So I now train to play, but not play to train, and that in a sense is building up my foundation, my athletic foundation, in terms of how to progress forward. Do I slack off sometimes? You bet I do. With that being said, then, with Jesus' words, to truly create a formidable foundation, we read the words, so that we can live by them. And I'm going to end up by reading the last verse. The last verse of Matthew chapter 7, verse 28. And so it was when Jesus had ended these sayings, that the people are astonished at his teaching, For he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes.